We're continuing our forum tonight with two candidates running for the 2-year seat in the House of Representatives, 20th District. The 20th District covers Plymouth, Northville Township, part of the city of Northville, and the eastern part of Canton. As before, the candidates will have 1 minute to give an opening statement, 1 minute to respond to questions, and 1 minute for a closing statement. We'll start with Colleen Coburn. Your opening statement, please.
Good evening. My name's Colleen Coburn. I live in Plymouth, right around the corner. Lived here for a long time, over 20 years. 1 minute is an interesting challenge. We were just agreeing on that. I have been a Plymouth City Commissioner for 8 years. I served as when I started my career coming out of college, I served as the Director of Concessions for Detroit Metropolitan Airport, where we blew up 40-year, no strings attached, sweetheart deals, and made the process much more transparent, brought this beautiful restaurants and stores that you see in the terminal today through a very transparent process. I was also appointed by the governor to serve as a liquor control commissioner for the state, where I learned all about the challenges that small businesses face. I know that I can take my experience to Lansing to be the kind of person that can reach across the aisle, which is evidenced by the vast amount of support I've gotten from organizations statewide, and fix the things that are broken in Lansing. Good luck, baby.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're going to do this in 5 minutes, or in 1 minute, but my name is Jeff Noble, and I am also running for State House of Representatives. I'm a constitutional conservative, but I also am willing to work with people across the aisle. I've always tried to welcome every individual of every different type, regardless of ethnic or socioeconomic background. I've been endorsed by a lot of different folks. For example, the Police Officers Association of Michigan, the Great Lakes Education Project, Small Business Association of Michigan, Michigan Manufacturers Association, so many other organizations that have seen that what we believe and what we're holding to is the best for our state. I hope that you'll give us the opportunity to explain a little bit. I don't know how we're going to do it in 1 minute, but we're going to do the best that we possibly can. And so I'm Jeff Noble, and I look forward to talking with you tonight.
Thank you. It looks like we have a lot of new people in the audience, so I'll mention that if you have any questions, there are league members on each side that have 3x5 cards. You can write a question. They'll give those questions to the ladies over here who are sorting through so that there aren't, multiple questions with the same question on it. And then they give them to me, and I will ask the questions of the two people running for the 20th. So thank you. And we'd like you to hold applause until the very end so we can get as many questions in as possible. Okay. We'll start with Colleen again for the first question. In the past 2 years, surprise legislation has been introduced after Christmas, such as attempted straight party voting ban last year. If elected, what would you do to eliminate this practice?
Well, a legislator can introduce whatever legislation a legislator wants to introduce, I think. To eliminate the practice is one concept, but to eliminate what might happen because of the practice, I think, is probably the bigger issue. Everybody tries to accomplish things in a lame duck session. I believe that's what the questioner is referring to. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We saw what happened with straight ticket voting. The courts have ruled on that definitively a bunch of times. I think people if you elect an individual, the person you elect has the right to try to enact any legislation he or she wants to and see what kind of support that person gets. So I don't think that I would necessarily be opposed to the concept of late session introduction of legislation, but sometimes it's a little shenanigan-y.
I think honesty and transparency is the most important thing. The idea of doing things sort of secretly, it is legal, it is the thing that you can do in a lame duck session, but is it the right thing to do? And I would discourage anything that takes place that is controversial, and we should stand up for what is right and try to represent the people of our district. And if you told me we don't want that kind of a thing, I would take it to Lansing and I would say they don't want it, so I don't want it.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. Noble.
Thank you.
Do you believe that marriage equality is settled law in the United States?
Marriage equality is settled law. In different states, they have different definitions of marriage.
The Supreme Court has spoken on this.
Well, I appreciate that, but my question is are you, I really don't know what you want me, how you want me to answer this question, because if you want me to say the Supreme Court has ruled on this, yes, they've ruled on this. But if that's not what you're asking, if you're asking me what I think about, has it been settled? No, I don't think it has.
You're entitled to answer it any way you like.
Correct.
As some of the candidates for school board who spoke before us said, I support all of the Constitution and all of the laws, and yes, it is absolutely settled law.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question with Ms. Pover. Do you support shutting down the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline through the Mackinac Straits?
I think it's a matter that requires a lot of consideration. It's a complicated issue. There is certainly jeopardy in that line. We know that there have been weak spots identified in Line 5. If something bad happens with Line 5, it's a complete disaster for the Great Lakes. So, but on the other hand, there is the matter of, well, how do we get energy that's currently going through that pipeline to the people, particularly in the Upper Peninsula. So it bears a great deal of study and scrutiny. I am very much in favor of being sure that scientific, evidence-based information goes into the decision dealing with that pipeline, but it certainly is not something that we can turn a blind eye to.
Until we have some kind of plan in place, we can't just shut down a pipeline. We have to make sure that we're getting the energy where it needs to be. We need to make sure it's done in a safe manner. I love the Great Lakes. It's one of our greatest resources in Michigan. We need to do everything we can to protect that and make sure that it's always clean and available to the people to utilize. But at the same time, I want to make sure whatever that alternative is, it is in place and effective before we ever do anything with that pipeline. Right now, that pipeline is working fine. There doesn't seem to be any problem with that, and the idea of just shutting it down is going to impact the UP in a negative fashion, and I just don't think that's the right thing for us to do at this point.
Okay, the next question will start with Mr. Noble. Do you support the Regional Transit Authority millage proposal? Why or why not?
I've been talking about that, and I still want to do some more study on that. I just have to be real straightforward with you on that. I'm not convinced that raising taxes and trying to have this transit situation put in place, society is changing. And with the technologies and things that are coming down the pike, I think buses are less and less utilized. If you ever looked at a bus, it's got all the windows covered. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because they're all empty. I don't know. But the idea of trying to spend money and try to make a system that comes out here into our community and make us pay for it, when I think a vast majority of people will never use it, I think is kind of the wrong way to look at it. We don't want to raise taxes just to accommodate somebody's agenda.
Well, it would be totally up to the voters to decide whether or not they support the Regional Transit Authority. As an individual, I do support it because I think that the people who need mass transit desperately need mass transit. I have a car. Most of us in this room, in this district, have cars, probably more than one in our homes. But the many people who are trying to get to jobs, trying to get home from jobs, don't have that luxury. And I think that if the voters support the millage, I think it's a great thing. I don't think it's, and I don't consider it a tax. You have to be straightforward with you. I suppose you have to call it that, but if the citizens vote for it, it's the citizens' decision. It's the voters' decision. So from that perspective, I think it's a good thing to have. I'll be voting for it myself because I think it's a good thing for people who really need it and don't have any other alternatives.
Thank you. The next question from Ms. Pogar. Do you support deregulating the energy industry? How do you feel about the 10% choice cap?
I think that deregulation in the energy industry is an important thing that bears a great deal of scrutiny. The energy industry is vitally important, obviously, to all of our lives, and I think that looking at reasonable, again, evidence-based, fact-based regulation makes a great deal of sense, particularly when it comes to reliability and safety. As it regards the 10% cap, I do not support increasing that cap. I think the cap is fine where it is right now until something is demonstrated that would need that to be raised, but it's adequate for now, and I don't support raising it.
I would agree, or I would say that choice is necessary for electricity. We also have to make sure that whatever those resources or whatever those electricity issues are or resources are cost effective and not mandated or not promoted in an unfair fashion. I do support the 10% cap, at least protecting that at this particular time, or maintaining that. But I want to make sure that whatever energy sources that we're using, that they're cost effective, that they don't penalize lower income people, and that the people of our community agree with that. So again, as I said, through all of these debates and every opportunity I've had, it's up to the people to make those decisions. I haven't emphasized that on every answer that I've given, but I do want you to understand as a representative, we represent you, and what you desire to have happen is what's going to happen based on me as your representative.
The next question will start with Mr. Noble. Please comment on the gross underfunding of education by state government.
I love some of these questions because they have a taint to them. I just have to tell you. To say it's gross underfunding, I do think that, and I've heard the school board, and I appreciate all your insight about the $7,500 per student, and you said that you would like to have it at $8,600, and you even went on to say that $10,000. I think there are ways in which to get funding that will not require the raising of taxes. That's the biggest issue that I think we have. Folks are tired of being pickpocketed by legislation and by government coming and saying, we want a new program, pay for it. We need to find ulterior ways in which we can find funding, and there are ways. There's lots of ways in which we can do that, where we don't have to come back and demand from the taxpayer, give us more. Because my question always is, how much is ever going to be enough? And the answer is, it'll never be enough.
I do believe that the schools have a giant funding problem. We're operating under Proposal A, which was, as was pointed out in the earlier forum, is a very complicated equation. It was put in place in 1994 as a temporary fix. 22 years is not temporary. The reality of the situation is that there are components to the way schools are run and schools are funded, but one of the biggest ones is the per pupil funding mechanism. We need to revisit this and put in, especially in our district, Plymouth, Canton, Northville, the district is vastly different than it was in 1994, and that's not reflected in the funding mechanism, and that's not fair. When I go to doors day after day after day, this is the number one thing that I hear about. It's the number one thing that I care about. Equitable funding of education, regardless of your zip code, and also finding a way to allow school districts, if they want to put a millage out to the voters to allow funding for classroom expenses for teachers, not just for infrastructure and technology. If the voters want to fund it, let them fund it.
Thank you. We'll have the next question with Ms. Pobar, but I want to mention the questions are audience questions, not league questions. So if you feel there's any attitude, this is your audience.
Take it up with the citizens.
The next question will be from Ms. Pobar. Given that a central principle of the Republican Party is deregulation, and in light of the recent Wells Fargo exposure, please explain why anyone should vote for someone who espouses such a position.
Yikes. I'm not gonna answer the question. I don't think it has to do with our race. I apologize to the questioner, but I'm not gonna talk about the entire party as one. I don't think that that's reasonable.
No, I agree.
Good?
I agree with that as well. One of the things that we promised through this whole thing is that there would not be negative ads, there would not be slamming.
Well,
she's running her race, I'm running my race. Now, I don't have any control over what may be happening from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, but nevertheless, we're trying to do that. So the idea of trying to group all Republicans in one big group, I think, is kind of an unfair question as well. If you want to talk to me about some of these things, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you, but let's just keep it about this race. I think we'd be much better off and we'd be better as a community.
But I still get to go first on the next one.
Yes, you do.
We'll let you do that.
Thank you very kindly.
Where do you stand on expanding the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity, so all Michiganders are protected.
I support expanding Elliott Larson to include gender identity, LGBTQ. I think it's the settled law that we referred to earlier in many areas already reflects this. I think it's reasonable to treat everyone as people, regardless of their gender, their national origin, their race, their sexual orientation.
Thank you. Mr. Noble?
I think the same basic thing, the idea of treating anybody special or leaving anybody out of a situation, depending on whatever it might dictate, is the wrong thing to do. We have to recognize that all people are created equal, that all people are given inalienable rights for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So the idea of trying to cut somebody off or trying to discourage somebody because of their gender, it's the public decision, and it's something that we have to be willing to look at and support. But I would never want to discriminate against anybody, regardless of any differences they may possibly have. And I think that we would be wrong to try to implement some kind of discrimination.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Do you support Governor Snyder's decision to hit the pause button regarding allowing Syrian refugees into Michigan?
You know, immigration is an important thing for our nation. I'm a firm believer in folks coming to this country and bringing their gifts and talents and wanting to be a part of the American dream that is available to anyone who is willing to put forth the effort. The only concern that I have with the current situation is the fact that refugees that are coming in are not being vetted. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what their intentions are. We don't have any idea about their health condition. None of those things are made available right now. We're just being forced to take a lot of people into this country that we have no idea. And believe me, Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of those organizations know that. And they're going to take advantage of that. We need to have a situation where we know who's coming into the country, why they're here, and that they're willing to assimilate into the American culture and not come here to try to cause problems or difficulties for a nation that is great and wonderful as us.
Well, I think that the bulking of all immigrants into a pile saying, well, we have to be suspicious about all of them is a wrong-headed thing. People are leaving their countries because they feel like they have to for either their safety or their economic viability, in large part. This is the land of the American dream. Everybody, I mean, all of us have grown up in that, I think. The reality in our country is that the majority of people who do heinous acts, who cause problems, are homegrown Americans who were born here, who are native to the United States of America. And to characterize people because they're from the country of Syria as potentially dangerous, I think, is extreme overreach.
Okay. The next question, we can start with Ms. Pover. Would you support repealing right to work?
Yes.
I want to go back to your last question before we do anything else, only because I was not characterizing one group of people. Anyone that comes into this United States needs to be vetted, whether they come from Canada or wherever, I don't care where it is. We need to know who's coming into the United States and make sure they're here for the right reasons. If they come in here for the American dream, amen, I think that's the most wonderful thing they can do. But we need to know why they're coming and what the purpose is. So I'm not putting Syrians in their own category. I'm just simply saying anyone that comes to the United States, whether it be from Canada, whether it be from Germany, whatever, I don't care what it is, we need to make sure that whoever comes to the United States, we understand why they're here. And I would still support right to work. There, got it all in?
Thank you.
You're
You
welcome.
have 2 minutes for that one.
What's that?
You got an extra minute for that one.
Well,
I think you're first.
We're
only going to have time for one more question because we have to be out of the library.
Speed debating.
yeah, this is the tough.
So we'll start this one with Ms. Pover.
It's Mr. Noble's turn.
Oh, is it? I apologize.
No worries.
I'll do whatever. I'm a servant.
It was that skip there. So, Mr. Noble,
Yes, ma'am.
in addition to their normal funding, The Detroit Public Schools received an additional $32 million of taxpayer money this year. That equates to $48 per pupil diverted from schools in your district. Do you support or oppose this?
Well, I think that everyone that moved to our district moved here for a reason. When I moved here many years ago, we chose this place because of the school systems. My daughters went to Plymouth Canton school system and had a great job, and got a great education. One of the things that I think is important is that we keep more tax dollars in our community rather than shipping them out. The idea that Detroit, if Detroit is having some struggles and that kind of stuff, if we can help them, I guess, and have those monies, that's one thing. But we really need to work on trying to keep more money back in this district. You moved here to have quality schools. You should be able to have your tax dollars be used for those school systems and not trying to fund, quite frankly, a lot of failing schools that need to be looked at and evaluated to see if they're actually viable. We sent money down there with no real checks and balances, and I think we made a mistake.
I think we did make a mistake in the $617 million package that was passed, sponsored by for-profit charter school special interests. The package that was originally designed was agreed upon by the Senate Democrats, the Senate Republicans, the House Democrats, the governor, the emergency manager, the mayor of Detroit, the state treasurer, business leaders from Michigan, the Detroit Regional Chamber, almost everybody except for the for-profit charter school lobby and the Senate, the House Republicans. Losing my mind. And so that package is not going to fix what's broken. So there had to be a little patch up of this. It was $72 million, I think, not $32 million.
Yeah, it was.
And it's unfortunate, but it is the reality. If we funded schools properly statewide, these problems would be mitigated in large part. Also, the encroachment of for-profit charter schools on Detroit has decimated that district. The second largest district in the state of Michigan are people who live in Detroit and send their kids to other districts. It's unbelievable.
Mr. Miller?
No, he already.
I already
You
did.
did that. Okay, the final question, we'll start with Ms. Pover. Would you support repealing regulations that prohibit companies from extracting oil and gas from underneath the Great Lakes?
In all likelihood, yes, because but I need to study it some more, of course. This whole fracking thing is very complicated, and it's got a lot of technical components to it. But I think that the Great Lakes are a gigantic natural resource for us, and the jeopardizing of the Great Lakes is a very precarious thing, and it would bear certainly more study.
I apologize. I had a hard time hearing the question. Would you mind repeating that, please?
No problem.
Thank you.
Would you support repealing regulations that prohibit companies from extracting oil and gas from underneath the Great Lakes?
Would I repeal those?
Would you support
Yes,
repealing regulations? That's the question.
So you're asking me basically, do I believe that we should be able to try to extract oil from underneath the Great Lakes? If it's safe, if it's a positive thing, I don't see a real problem with it. Again, we have to talk with the companies, we have to talk with scientists, we have to get all the information we possibly can. But if there are resources that we can utilize, resources that we can come up with, and I think we need to do that in an educated fashion and make sure that we protect our natural resources in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for repeating the question, too.
Okay. At this point, we'd like each candidate to do their wrap-up statement, and we'll start with Mr. Noble.
You know, I've never been a politician before, and I think that we've learned in this political environment that the last thing that the people really want is more politicians in government. They really want common people who have dealt with the issues, have struggled in their day-to-day activities, have seen the tax increases, have felt the struggles of the higher gas prices and lousy roads and all those things. I've felt all that. I've seen all that. The reason I got involved with this is because I was frustrated, like many of you are frustrated, on the ineffectiveness of folks that are going up to Lansing. What I bring to the game is very simple. I'm going to listen to you. I've spent my life listening to people and trying to help them find problems and solve problems. My heart is to help the people of Northfield Township, Plymouth Township, and the eastern section of Canton to have their will done, your will done, not my will done. Even though some of the questions we might have answered made it sound like it was about me, it's not about me. It's all about you, and that's what we've said along this whole campaign, that it's all about the voters, has nothing to do with me. I'm a servant, and I hope you give me that opportunity, and she told me to stop.
She has the worst job in this whole deal.
I'm telling you.
I have spent my entire career in the public and private sector fixing what's broken. I don't think politician's a dirty word. It's a moniker that can be dirty about some people, but I have done this as a public servant.
The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Thank you.
To do what's best for my community. I've served for 8 years on the Plymouth City Commission. I have been endorsed by many, many organizations from across the political spectrum. I've proven that I can work with people from all political aspects. And I know that I am the one candidate who's got the experience, the temperament, and the vision to be able to do this for our district in a representative way and to continue to do the great, many of you in this room I've worked with collaboratively, and I know that you can testify to that. So I want to go to Lansing, take what I've learned, take what I've accomplished, and bring that collegiality and that collaborative nature to solving the problems that are widespread in our state government today. And I would appreciate your vote on November 8th.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank the candidates for participating in the forum tonight, and the Plymouth Library for allowing us to use their facility. The forum has been videotaped and can soon be viewed on the League's website, lwvnorthwestwayne.org. And if you pick up one of these cards outside, it has the information right there, so you don't have to memorize it. We'd like to thank all of you again for attending the forum to learn about your candidates. All the candidates running in this November's election were also invited to participate in the League of Women Voters Guide, a publication that you can access online by visiting vote411.org, or you can find a print copy at the libraries after October 12th. We'll be delivering them to all the libraries after October 12th. Election Day is November 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You will be asked for a picture ID when you go to vote, but if you don't have a picture ID with you, you can still vote by signing an affidavit of identity. And that's very important for people to remember. There were problems in the previous elections. So an ID is required, but you can sign an affidavit and vote anyway. If you just registered for the first time or change of address, and you didn't do it at the Secretary of State's office or at the City Clerk's office, you do need to vote in person the first time. You cannot vote absentee. And what I mean by, not in those offices, we register lots of students in schools. We go to Schoolcraft. We register a lot of people at Schoolcraft. And we tell everybody that the first time they must vote in person. They can't vote absentee. This concludes the program and the forum for this evening. Thank you all for coming.